بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد الصادق الأمين. Thank you all for coming today. To those who are seeing me for first time, I am Mohammed Wafi. I'm Palestinian from Khan Yunis, from Gaza Strip. Gaza al-Azzi, that faces harshest living condition and its people faces genocide. All of you watch the news and follow social media, and you have witnessed the flower massacre carried out by the Israeli army 2 days ago. Watching is one thing, but listening to your relatives and friends is another. And experiencing this barbaric attack is indescribable. We are here to be voice of the voiceless, and I ask you not to forget the children and people of Gaza in everything you do in your daily lives. And here I remember the words of Mahmoud Darwish when he said, allow me to say it in Arabic first, وأنت تعد فطورك فكر بغيرك لا تنسى قوت الحمام وأنت تخوض حروبك فكر بغيرك لا تنسى من يطلبون السلام وأنت تسدد فاتورة الماء فكر بغيرك من يرضعون الغمام وأنت تعود إلى البيت بيتك فكر بغيرك لا تنسى شعب الخيام وأنت تنام وتحصي الكواكب فكر بغيرك ثم من لم يجد حيزا للمنام وأنت تحرر نفسك بالاستعارات فكر بغيرك من فقدوا حقهم بالكلام وأنت تفكر بالآخرين البعيدين فكر بنفسك قل ليتني شمعة في الظلام. I'll say it in English. And while you prepare your breakfast, think of others. Do not forget the pigeons' food. And while you wage your wars, think of others. Do not forget those who seek peace. And while you pay your water bill, think of others who are breastfeeding the clouds. And while you return to your home, think of others. Do not forget the people of the tents. And while you sleep and count the stars, think of the others. There are those who have no place to sleep. And while you liberate yourself with metaphors, think of others who have lost their right to speak. And while you think of others far away, think of yourself. Say, I wish I were a candle in the darkness. Today, among us, there is someone who sang and said, long live Palestine, long live Gaza. It's a great honor for me to present the Palestinian community in northeast of England in opening this event and welcoming one of the prominent figures defending the rights of the Palestinians people and the human rights wherever they may be. He responded to Piers Morgan and said, why am I being interrogated as if I were a harmful person while you treat war criminals with respect during their interviews? I haven't hurt a fly in my life. He dictated more than 15 years of his life to defending the Palestinian people, despite his great talent in singing, where he could have made millions of dollars like DJ Khaled. However, He always directed his songs against injustice and in support of the Palestinian people. Therefore, he was attacked and his songs were banned from being broadcasted in multiple places, the latest being Spotify. He has lost a lot, but he has won the hearts of the millions of Palestinians and supporters of humanity. While DJ Khaled, إلى مزابل التاريخ, to the trash. From his origin, you can tell that the blood of revolution runs in his vein. His country has suffered from war, destructions, and injustice. We know him as British, but his other half is from Iraq, the land of pride and dignity. His name is Karim, and Karim means generous in English. So he has been generous to us with his firm positions alongside the Palestinian people. He has strong style and is an educated person with convincing arguments that enable him to defeat anyone, no matter who they are. Therefore, his interview with the Zionist Perez Morgan was one of the strongest ever. Allow me to thank, on my behalf and on behalf of the Palestinian community, my brother Karim, Lowkey, for your presence today and for standing on the right side of history. Please welcome our brother Lowkey.
Wow. So that was an introduction which I am definitely not worthy of. We have the wonderful poets, artists, and those who are articulating the yearnings for justice in Palestine, like the poet Darin Tatur, for example, who wrote the poem on her Facebook, "Qawim ya sha'bi qawimhum." And for that, she was imprisoned by Israel. You have numerous fantastic figures from history within Palestine, outside of Palestine, that have absolutely sacrificed 1,000,000 times more than I ever could. And يعني بالعكس بالنسبة لي وسام الشرف على صدري. يعني أي تضحية لفلسطين, any sacrifice for Palestine is the highest honor in my personal opinion. I think that what we definitely are at an interesting phase of Zionist fascism within Palestine, and particularly the way it interacts with this society here. Across the last few decades, there has been an almost complete integration between Israel's security state and Britain's security state. And one of the key symptoms of it is in Newcastle. And so really, as a community, you have a really important opportunity to play a historical role in part of this, because I guarantee you that decades down the line, all of those who stood by and not only allowed this to happen, but actually were complicit with it, will be falling over themselves to claim they didn't. They will be doing everything they can. The very people that were trying to ban you protesting now will be claiming that they were protesting with you. People will embellish the roles that they played during this period in order to beautify the record, the historical record. Now, as you all will know better than me, Pearson Engineering was purchased by Rafael over the last few years. Rafael is the third largest Israeli arms company, and it's owned directly by the state. It was founded in 1948, initially as a science unit within the Israeli military, and then later went on to become this arms company, which produces some of Israel's most prized military contraptions. So, for example, the Iron Dome is a shared project of Rafael and Lockheed Martin. Now, Pearson Engineering are known for making the armoring of military vehicles. Raphael also take credit for producing vehicles that were used by the British military in their occupation of Iraq. And really, when I talk about Raphael purchasing this, obtaining this company, being part of the wider push to integrate Israel's military system with Britain, it's a very small cog in a massive machine. And I think it's essential for us to always analyze macro but fight micro, meaning that where there are local struggles in which we can impede the smooth passage of power, we absolutely must take those opportunities. And Newcastle has a prototype in Oldham. It has an example in London. It has an example in Leicester of where Israel's military companies have been defeated. Big bad Israel was defeated by little Oldham. It was defeated when similar circumstances, Elbit Systems, Israel's largest arms company, procured a company, Ferranti Technologies, in Oldham. And what happened next? The community not only came out and demonstrated outside the factory, they printed up literature about what was happening in the factory. They set up stalls in the town centre. They gave up information about what was happening in the Ferranti Technologies Elbit Systems factory. They went door to door. They knocked on doors and told people, did you know that this factory here is connected to this? And importantly, Palestine Action came in tandem with the community and shut down that factory until Ferranti Technologies was sold at a loss. It was procured for around £12 million and it was sold for £9 million. These are the type of actions that we are going to need to actually effectively face what we are talking about, to actually get wins. These are the kind of things that we are going to have to do. Now, with Pearson Engineering, there's also an important crossover that people should be aware of. Now, the director of Pearson Engineering, the company owned now by Raphael in Newcastle, is Lord John Hutton. He's a Labour Party peer, and he's somebody that served in the Blair government in numerous positions, including as Defence Secretary from 2008 to 2009. Now, when he finished his political career in office with the Blair government, he went on to be the chairman of Royal United Services Institute, which is a key British military think tank, which is funded by BAE Systems, Lockheed Martin, and Raytheon. He also was a part of the Henry Jackson Society, well known to have been founded by Alan Mendoza, who simultaneously is on the board of the JNF, the largest settlement building body in Palestine, which also has Benjamin Netanyahu and Israeli President Isaac Herzog on the board. In addition to that, Mr. Hutton also went on to be an advisor for Lockheed Martin. Well, now he presides as a director of Pearson Engineering alongside key figures from Raphael in a company which is directly owned by the Israeli state. How is it conceivable that you can have an individual in the House of Lords who is running a company owned by a foreign state? For all of the talk that you see in the media about particular states, there is a significant blind spot when you're talking about these links which exist between Israel as a state and those in our political class. I'm unaware of the exact timing of how long you want me to speak. I'm sure others need to speak too. But the bottom line is, since the founding of Palestine Action, 77 investors have pulled out of Elbit Systems. Since the founding of Palestine Action, 2 Elbit Systems sites in this country have been permanently shut down. Since the founding of Palestine Action, the British Ministry of Defence has cancelled £280 million worth of contracts with Elbit Systems, citing directly operational sovereignty. The value of shares in Elbit Systems, Israel's largest arms company, have decreased by 20% thanks to the activity of Palestine Action. The one recruiter that Elbit Systems had in this country has dumped Elbit Systems thanks to the activity. The one logistics company that would transport their goods, one of the 6 companies in this country which are licensed to carry military hardware, dumped them also. The website designer of Elbit Systems dumped them also. This is how we win. And this factory here is not an expression of strength. Actually, in direct contradiction of what they say it is. This is part of a body and a pressure point within a body. It has to be identified as such, and it has to be understood as a constant site of pressure. It can be made untenable to the point where the stigma in the community is so strong that people will not want to work in that factory. People will not want to work for that company. And you know why? You know why? Because the images they are seeing every day are a direct reflection of that state and that company. We have a moral and legal obligation to do this. Britain is a signatory to the Arms Trade Treaty, which says that no exports should be permitted if the British government has the reason to believe they, quote unquote, may be used for violations of international humanitarian law. If you want to see the violations of international humanitarian law, look on your phone right now. They are legion. The ruling of the ICJ makes it clear that those who are involved in this process are part of a plausible genocide. They are on notice. Now, Pearson's put out a statement saying that nothing in their factory is currently used by the IDF. Doesn't necessarily speak for components, and there is a language that often these companies use when they say none of our equipment is being directly used. Oh, but there's this component which is taken across there. They don't admit that. The other one is Responsive Engineering, which is the daughter company of Pearson Engineering. This company doesn't rule out that any of its equipment is being used by Israel in Gaza. But even alone the fact that it's directly owned by the Israeli government, this has to be understood as an Israeli military site in Newcastle. In Newcastle. What will we tell our grandchildren we did at this time? We have to be willing to think outside of the box and step outside the parameters of what is the officially sanctioned form of activism in this country. They tell us that resistance is futile. We tell them resistance is fertile, and we will continue to plant seeds for trees, even if we don't live to sit in the shade of them. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Lowkey. So now we're going to have some time to have a conversation. Members of the audience have given some questions across. We will only be taking 2 live questions, and that will be from 2 Palestinian youth in the audience. But I want to start by saying you've been prolific in the content you've been creating every day in this genocide. And I want to ask how you keep going in these inconceivably dystopian times.
I mean, if anything, I feel that the duty that falls upon all of us, including me, has not been fulfilled. So I don't necessarily view it in a way that this time has been particularly physically taxing. Obviously, the extent of what Israel has been willing to do, I possibly underestimated personally. the extent of tolerance that exists within the political classes of some of the most powerful governments in the world I also would have underestimated personally. It's been further than I would have thought. I think also what we need to cultivate is a culture of investigation, because they're not telling us the truth about the British government's involvement in this. Britain not only has sent spy missions, even yesterday, over the top of Gaza. You're talking tens, over 70 spy missions of the R1 Shadow plane, which one of its specialities is target acquisition. You also have the Reaper drones that the US are sending on top of Gaza. And so what that implies is that Britain has a direct participant role in the bombing of Gaza. You've got British components in the Apache helicopters, you've got British components in the sniper rifles, you've got British components in the F-16, you've got British components in the F-35s that Israel used. So Britain is involved in a nuts and bolts capacity. And unfortunately, the extent of our understanding of that still is not where it needs to be, generally for a society to act within their rights, politically speaking. If we do not have access to the truth, how is it that we can actually effectively participate in the political system? If we're being lied to and we're being told that the conversation is about that and steered in that direction and that direction, it's very difficult for us to really put our hands in a tangible way on what is happening. And that's not even stepping into what the US role is. You know, Akwaturi, the British base in Cyprus, has been essential to these operations. They've sent flights, you know, in the first month of the genocide, you had daily flights, about a flight a day going of C-17 planes that can carry military equipment and soldiers on them. You saw an increase of 500 British soldiers sent there. In addition to that, you had very early on, the British government issue a D-notice to journalists. So for those that don't know what a D-notice is, it's when the Ministry of Defence sends out a message and says, we'd prefer that you don't speak about this particular aspect of pertaining to British security. And they said, this was after The Sun had published an article about SAS presence in Cyprus with the possibility of activity in Gaza. Now, I would ask the question, why would a D-notice be necessary if there is no SAS activity in Gaza? Aaron Bushnell, you know, the member of the US Air Force who died outside the Israeli embassy several days ago, according to reports by his friend, had access to US Special Forces involvement on the ground. We know that the White House posted a picture of Joe Biden in Israel talking about these brave first responders, US first responders who were from the US Delta Force. Which would also imply involvement of the US Delta Force on the ground. So the extent to which Britain and the United States are directly in a hands-on way involved in the killing in Gaza, we need more information about that, and we need to get hold of that. We also know that Israeli military figures are trained in this country. Some of the directors who are now present on the board of Pearson's Engineering have come directly out of Elbit, have come directly out of the Israeli military. They're essentially high-ranking agents of the Israeli government. Are there Israeli military figures coming to Newcastle? What do we know about this activity in this country? You've also just yesterday in the Netherlands, in Lebanon, found a team of special forces from the Netherlands, armed men from Dutch citizens. What do we know about these operations? You have a war against the region now, and you have two clear axes. You have the axis of assistance and you have the axis of resistance. The axis of resistance has many different components who are organizing in ways to push back against the trilateral security state of Israel, the United States, and Britain in the region. The axis of assistance is doing airdrops over Gaza and dropping food into the sea for some of the poorest people in the world to search through the sea to try and get. People are starving to death right now because of an engineered an engineered operation of mass starvation, which Britain and the United States has been a key part of by cutting the funding to UNRWA. So, absolutely, we need to do more. And for right now, how we're feeling about this situation is something we will get to at a later date. What all of this means, how all of this will be historicized, is also in our hands. So we need to be forceful and we need to get to the truth.
So to bring it back to Newcastle for a second, we have members in the audience who've been protesting at Newcastle University and Northumbria University. Newcastle with relationships to Leonardo, Northumbria with relationships to Lockheed Martin. And I've got questions from the audience about how to best spread awareness, and also for those people working at those universities, and I include myself here, what can we do with institutions that are not openly supporting Palestine or even recognising the genocide is happening?
I think I would have to be very careful, pontificating or advising you on the specific context of your workplace. I think it depends on what kind of representation you have, what kind of collective bargaining powers you have. So it is important to know the kind of specifics of that, and I wouldn't necessarily be in a position to suggest anything concrete now. What I do know in terms of ways in which students at universities and staff at universities have been able to push through certain policies. The tricky thing about the universities is they, in the neoliberal era, view their staff as replaceable. More of them are on zero-hour contracts than any time previously. In addition to that, the students are viewed as merely passing through the institution. And so it's very difficult to get, universities are quite slippery in all of these things. You would need the teachers' union, the National Union of Students. You'd need them to actually be in a position where they wanted to fight. And the fact is, we're not there. There's been a war against the unions, from the blacklisting scandal, from the infiltration of these organizations by spy cops. It's been very, very difficult. And obviously leaderships who are wedded often to the Labour Party and all types of liberal ideas. And so it means that it's very difficult, very, very difficult to get strong fighting stance in those situations. The NUS has been battered quite effectively by the Israel lobby and used me as a weapon, unfortunately, in that process. So how it is we can maneuver within that terrain, I'm not sure. Definitely something we need to think about more. But ultimately, a lot of the institutions in our country are targeted, and there are several projects that exist. For instance, the British government is tendering a £5.5 million contract for pushing through for imposing the IHRA on educational institutions, and also enforcing a certain narrative about October 7th within institutions. It's going to be interesting who gets those contracts. We are aware that a key Israel lobby group has just been awarded over 50 million by the British government to carry out some of these services. So there's going to be a fight within these institutions, and people have to stop being cowards. People have to be brave. They have to also understand that it's very, very difficult to impose a blanket blacklisting of an individual. It's very, very difficult to impose a blanket ban on a person's employment. So if you are in an institution which fires you because you support Palestine, you also have the key case of David Miller recently in the Employment Tribunal at Bristol University. It is against the 2010 Equality Act for any employer to discriminate against you for your anti-Zionist views now. That's in law. That's a precedent that was set by the David Miller case. Therefore, your hand is stronger than ever before when dealing with these kind of situations. But also, even in the event that you were to be fired or you were to lose your job because of the position that you've taken to support the Palestinians in Gaza, there will be another place that will employ you. I know that everyone's situations are different and people are struggling more than ever. So I understand when people say it's very difficult for them to speak out about Palestine. But maybe speaking out publicly is not your function. Maybe doing something else that contributes to this struggle is your function. Maybe doing something less public is something that you can do. But always remember that any blacklisting that is put upon you is not blanket and is not comprehensive and will not be able to stop you working everywhere and anywhere.
So I'm going to ask the two local Palestinian youth to come and ask their questions now. Mustafa, would you come first to ask the question to Lowkey on the microphone?
What was your dream when you were a kid?
I think I wanted to play football. And what's your dream? To play football as well? I'm sure you can do it.
And then this is Mustafa's cousin.
What do you think about what Rishi Sunak said last night about him calling these Palestinian protests terror on the streets?
The British political class is more deeply integrated, and we have to understand the campaign against Corbynism actually as part of this. If we just understand the move against Corbyn as being about the British establishment, then we are simply missing a trick. One of the key organisations that lobbied relentlessly against Corbyn and was on the news every single day, the Board of Deputies, put in its trustees report of 2020, the year after Corbynism was slaughtered, put the words, "We have a close working relationship with the Israeli embassy, with the Ministry of Strategic Affairs, and with the IDF spokesman's department." That fact has not been emphasized enough, and the lesson from it has not been learned. Israel has key operations happening in this country. The Roy Institute, a key Israel think tank, military think tank, did a study of London, and it concluded that London was the hub of the hubs of delegitimization of Israel. And what the Roy Institute suggested was splitting those that are active on Palestine into two categories. One category was criticizers, the other category was delegitimizers. Now, it suggested a different course of action for each of those. For the criticizers, it suggested something very interesting: strategic engagement strategy. Strategic engagement strategy. What did that mean? It meant that organizations operate in the country to engage with those that criticize Israel and drag them towards a position of normalization. Okay? Drag them towards Oslo, the orthodoxy of Oslo. The other side, which are the delegitimizers, should be shut down everywhere they can be shut down. Their events should be targeted, institutions that have anything to do with them should be reported to the Charity Commission, etc., etc., etc. And that policy has played out across the Corbyn years. Israel performs key functions for the British security state, and Britain performs key functions for the Israeli security state. Rishi Sunak, at this present period of time, has an increasingly vocal contingency within the British establishment who are opposed to what Israel is doing. They dare not point at the nuts and bolts of this genocide because it will reveal British involvement. But they are opposed. Ben Wallace, the former defence minister, even went as far in an article as accusing Israel of committing war crimes. Effectively, that's what he said. But during his time as defence minister, Britain signed a military pact with Israel that has implications which we are not fully aware of. This is a secret military pact which would have implications for when either side enters war. Meaning, these spy flights that Britain is sending over the top of Gaza, probably helping with target acquisition, will be part of that military agreement with Israel. You have numerous figures from within the British establishment who are making very unhappy noises about what Israel is doing. Unfortunately, there is a perception that Israel is merely a bulwark of US imperialism and US policy. And I'm just sorry. The evidence begs to differ with that. I understand people have a sort of ideological attachment to that perception. But the evidence begs to differ. The tail is wagging the dog in numerous ways. In numerous ways. I mean, how many people in this country know that the company that manages London's water system, Tadaku, is based in Tel Aviv and is staffed by individuals from the Talpot unit in the Israeli military? Okay, I'm not casting aspersions on intention here, though I could. If it was the other way round and it was a Russian company with individuals that came directly out of Russian intelligence, far more question marks would be raised. But Tadaku receives the information about London's water system and then passes the information to Thames Water. This is not an even relationship. This is not an even relationship. And so the question here, when you see somebody like Rishi Sunak, is you understand that there's heavy pressure on him to be making these statements. And in addition to that, now the protective aspect of the British state, which is protecting all of us, is the police, the CPS, and juries. The police, the CPS, and juries. The Israel lobby is putting a lot of effort into lobbying the police to make more arrests, into lobbying the CPS into charge more people along lines that are not clear yet. What they want is the police to be applying the IHRA. That's why you're seeing people arrested for placards. And that is where the appeasement of the last 4 to 5 years of most of what we understand to be the left has got us. The IHRA being accepted as a legal definition. This is about the criminalization of anti-Zionism. Let's be clear. I don't want to hear anyone ever say anything to me about anyone that was smeared over these years, stigmatizing them. I will trust you less because you stigmatize those people. I will trust you less. The Labour Party is not a vehicle for actual political change in this country anymore. You entertain that notion at your peril. When Keir Starmer is in government, he will enact even more authoritarian policies, and he will act to lock up even more of us. Some of our number will enter the prison for this. That is not something we need to fear. That is not something we need to fear. Criminalization for supporting 2 million besieged, starved, bombed, and murdered people is the biggest honor we could ever have in our entire lives. The cleanest place at this stage is the cell. It is not the Houses of Parliament, it's the cell. Be aware that Rishi Sunak, when he makes these statements, it is a symptom of an integration of Israel, the United States, and Britain in the security state. But a battle for the soul of the British establishment is taking place at this stage. It's not to say that they don't have the tolerance to commit massacres and to commit genocide. Historically they have, but in the way it's being done today, there is a lot of unhappiness on the part of very high-ranking people within the British state. You cannot underestimate that. And like I say, even if you convince Mark Rowley and the police in the way that they're bullying him now to arrest us, fine. Even if you convince the Crown Prosecution Service to charge us, fine. You put us in front of a judge and you put us in front of a jury. Do you think that jury does not have access to the same images that all of us do? Those images condemn Israel more than any words I could ever say would. So if you ever enter the court as the accused, you will leave the court as the accuser. Do not be defensive. Step off of defense. This is the time for us to push forward.
Aligned to what you just said, I wanted to just acknowledge that there's two people in the audience who were on trial for their direct action at Raphael. I don't know if they want to stand so we can give them a clap. So it's clear the role arms factories are playing, as you've shared today. I've got a question here about the role of oil and gas corporations and what they're playing, their role they're playing in Gaza, and the serious threat that they hold, and if you have anything to say about that.
Well, I'm probably aware that, everyone has the protest to go to as well. I'm taking quite a long time with the answers. We've still got time. Okay. In terms of what I understand regarding Gaza particularly, is that there were several big contracts that were signed by the Israelis. That land in Gaza and in the sea is rich with gas. And at one point, it was supposed to be developed, but then when you had the Palestinian government in Gaza there, rather than the alternative in the West Bank, what happened was the Israelis, of course, would do everything they could to block the development of those resources in that way, in a way that could enrich Palestinians to some extent. And so now you do have companies that are BP is one of them, others that have made agreements with the Israeli government to develop these parts of Gaza. So, we have to be aware of that aspect of the story without a doubt.
Got a question from a youth in the audience. She's 10 years old, and she says, "I want to help Palestine. What can I do for Palestine?"
I'm not necessarily the person to advise you on that. It depends what your resources are, what your family situation is. But there are ways, and the key thing I think for us to realize is that unfortunately, in the schools you have several behavioral modification programs which are targeted at children to try and push them towards normalization. One of them is Solutions Not Sides, which historically shares funders with illegal settlements in the West Bank, with the Friends of the IDF, with Keir Starmer, with the Conservative Party, with the Board of Deputies. I identified 23 members of staff of the parent organization of Solutions Not Sides who are former Israeli military and Israeli intelligence. You also had 3 individuals who were simultaneously employed by the Israeli government at the same time as they were employed by that organizations. Now that organization has really and will be, off the back of all of this, getting a lot of government funding to go into schools and have these classes which, much in the same way as that mural which was painted in East London, which had a Muslim girl holding an Israeli flag, Solutions Not Sides carries out this type of work in schools. They will take pictures of Muslim children holding Israeli flags to try and, it's wrapped up in the Prevent agenda, and the aim of it is to try and essentially push children towards a softer way of looking at the Palestinian cause. Solutions Not Sides is not the only one. There's another one, the Forum for Discussion of Israel-Palestine. There's another one, Friends of Roots, which actually is even worse than Solutions Not Sides. Solutions Not Sides focuses on bringing, quote-unquote, Israelis and Palestinians together as if the micro can sort of overcome the macro. Micro human interactions somehow have any effect on big material power relations and an asymmetric military equation. Friends of Roots is worse in that it tries to get illegal settlers and Palestinians to meet and be friends. And so Friends of Roots has been defeated in a school in Manchester. Solutions Not Sides has been defeated in a school in Redbridge. And there's numerous ways in which these organizations do not have the consent of the parents for the schools. But it just takes the parents having access to the information about these organizations in order to push back. But unfortunately, that will be the next phase of what happens in the schools. It intensified in 2021, but after this, without a doubt, there's going to be a lot more of that pushing through the schools.
So we've got 2 more questions, just so we keep to time. What advice would you have for conscious rappers or artists? Why is art important in this time?
I think art has a function to some extent, providing, sort of crystallizing people's feelings in a way and giving them slogans. It has some use. I'm not necessarily convinced that it can move society in the way that I may have felt it could previously. In terms of what do I think rappers that are politically inclined, what are their options in the society today? It's definitely harder than ever because the monopoly on the music that we listen to has really been consolidated by the big 3, Sony, Universal and Warner, in the last decade more than ever. There was a period when LimeWire and other places that you could download MP3s was seen as a really world-changing mechanism with the way we understood music. But for me, the biggest thing is that music is now simply a vehicle through which data is mined in a way that it wasn't before. So when I grew up, you'd go to the shop, you'd buy a cassette, then you'd buy a CD, whatever, you'd listen to it. It's just this sort of private, intimate relationship between you and the music. Okay. Then it comes onto the MP3s, you download them onto your computer. Now, musicians gather revenue through the purchase of your information when you listen to their music. And it's never been like that in the history of music before. If you listen to one of my songs on YouTube or on Spotify, not that I know anything about your information is sold by Spotify or YouTube to whoever then advertises to you. The musician gets a percentage of the money that is generated from the selling of your information, which is built up from that phone, which has 5,000 character points on who you are. So the way that music, in terms of the very, like, the transactional aspect of it, has changed in a way that it never was previously. Unfortunately, it is disciplined ideologically, music. So, for example, if you were to look at the largest music company in the world today, it's Universal Music Group. The CEO of Universal Music Group, Lucian Grange, is a very close friend of Rishi Sunak. He actually took him as his +1 to Taylor Swift's birthday party. His wife also funds the Conservative Party, and also he was a close friend of David Cameron. So I'm not saying that necessarily reflects on the kind of music that is coming out of Universal. But historically, it was Universal that did reggae for Blair Peach. When Blair Peach was killed, Linton Kwesi Johnson did a song about it. It was Universal that released some of Bob Marley's greatest work, some of the more politically orientated music. However, where it is now, why do we not see all of this pain in Gaza? All of this pain, 30,000 people under the rubble. Why do we not see it reflected in the artistic sphere? And so then we have to question the dynamics that are at work within the music industry. How would it make sense that the community that I'm from, that Akala lived in, from our community, when the big labels came, they definitely didn't sign us or offer us any deals. They offered deals to young men, children, teenagers that were involved in the gang beef. And so then the question has to be asked, why would you not sign Akala, who can demonstrate to you that millions of people love his music, that he can sell over 500,000 books? Why would you not sign him to a major label? And why would you sign a teenager that is going through a particular phase in his life where there's particular level of risk to him and others around him? Why would you exacerbate that? Why would you increase that risk? It's not to say that these young men should not be given, young men and women should not be given the opportunity to reach largest amount of people as possible. But it's just simply a question of how and why is the arts world structured the way it is. And look at the British Arts Council, for example. It's just announced that if you're found to be making political statements, it can jeopardize your funding. What effect does that have on a society in the long term when you depoliticize the arts? We've undergone generations of depoliticization in this country, and it's seeped through many different institutions, not just the educational institutions, but also the commercial sphere, which the arts is all part of course.
Thanks. I think I have to use chair's privilege and add one more question in. So there's actually two more. And it's based on voting. We've had lots of questions on what on earth do we do? There are people who are supportive of a ceasefire, but Labour long voters, for example. How do you align with the vote Labour, vote genocide, no ceasefire, no vote? You know, what advice do you have for us? Because some of us are really lost on what to do in this coming election.
I mean, I agree that a vote for Labour is a vote for genocide. It's really incumbent upon Labour members of Parliament, also members of the party, to actually, in a very clear way, show to people and demonstrate to people what the discernible difference between Labour and the Tories is on major issues that affect our everyday life. When it comes to something as straightforward as what's happening in Gaza, the uniformity is so strong, is absolutely so strong, that where you have independent candidates like Andrew Feinstein in Holborn, Leanne Mohammed in Ilford North, when you have George Galloway in Rochdale, these are people who have a historical record. They are not careerists in that they have chopped and changed their political positions, particularly when it comes to foreign policy. We have not seen that, whereas these individuals have a traceable historical record. On that basis, I will definitely support Leanne in Ilford. I'll definitely support Andrew in Holborn. And I'm interested in looking around and seeing in what way we can put sugar in the petrol tank, find cracks in the monolith. Because essentially with Keir Starmer, when he gets in, he will be even more authoritarian than what the Tories have done. You know, Keir Starmer's services to Israel, it's very important that they are studied in depth, because when he was the director of public prosecutions, the one foreign state attorney that he met was Moshe Lador. The Israeli state attorney met with Keir Starmer. 2 months later, Keir Starmer blocked the prosecution of Tzipi Livni in this country because a judge had issued her arrest warrant. Keir Starmer has served Israel in other forms than just as the leader of the Labour Party. You know, you have hired by the Labour Party after the killing of Corbynism, Asaf Kaplan, a former agent of Unit 8200 in the Israeli military. That's the Israeli equivalent of GCHQ. That is the unit which surveils Palestinians and uses that information against them as a form of blackmail, as 43 whistleblowers from within the unit have said. Now, Asaf Kaplan is employed by the Labour Party for the purpose of social listening. How is this forgivable to have this level of integration? We've got a Labour lord who's here in Newcastle owning a company, or being the director of a company which is owned by the State of Israel. There's so many different aspects of what is happening. Luke Akehurst is on the NEC. He runs an Israel lobby group. We believe in Israel. How are none of these things conflicts of interest? How do you have any integrity as an institution if you have this level of cooperation between you and a foreign state? And sort of because of the Corbyn years, it's treated as almost impolite to mention it. But we have to, this is never again. What's happening in Gaza is the never again moment. If we let this happen, then we'll let anything happen. There's nothing that we will be able to stop.
I think that's an excellent point to finish on in our conversation. But I just wanted to mention that you've put such an emphasis on Raphael, which we really need to have in this region. And one of the members of the team asked if you may come and do a fundraiser with them and come to the factory and be there with us outside it. We'd love that to happen. So they may talk to you at Monument after this event. I'm going to pass to Mohammed now to close out. Thank you so much, Lowkey.
What an event. Great to have you here. Thank you very much, Karim. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we conclude this enlightening event, I'm struck by the profound impact that activism can have in shaping the course of history. And today we have been privileged to hear from Karim Dennis, also known as Lowkey, whose words have served as a clarion call for justice and liberation, particularly for the Palestinian people. Activism, in many forms, has time and again proven to be a catalyst for transformative change. One powerful example is the BDS movement, which has emerged as a potent tool in the fight against apartheid and oppression, targeting companies and institutions that profit from the occupation of Palestine. BDS campaigns have brought global attention to the plight of the Palestinian people and challenged their complicity. The complicity of those who benefit from the suffering. So beyond BDS, history replete with instances where activism has sparked meaningful change, from the civil rights movement in the United States to the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. Ordinary people have risen up to the challenge and demanded equality and freedom for all. In Palestine, the legacy of activism is woven into the fabric of everyday life, from the grassroots organizers to international solidarity movements. Palestine and their allies have waged a relentless struggle for self-determination and human rights. Whether through peaceful protests, cultural resistance, or international advocacy, Palestinian activism has inspired solidarity across the globe and brought attention to the injustices perpetrated by the apartheid Israeli occupation. For instance, most of you would have seen me mostly on the street, protesting, lobbying, and the many more actions that we do together. And that we bring to the streets and our demands to civil change and civil society, sharing videos on social media, where even I have started my own organization and page. And although these are very important and dynamic in their own unique ways, such as art, as we've seen around the room, is spontaneously art student at a protest created these placards. And so something which was quite fundamental throughout my studies is in architecture and the built environment is the focusing on my university papers on the various topics that relates to Palestine and architecture. And my most important research to date was when I wrote my bachelor's thesis, which was an investigation on the causal temporality in the Palestinian-Israeli conflicts. I say conflict because it's throughout the realm of academics, you have to be unbiased, and therefore that was the title. And I was kind of speaking on how our cities under occupation is designed to tackle urban conflicts, and how have these been implemented in the daily life of an occupied city, occupied working city under conflict. So looking at this, I was more looking at the causal temporality throughout time, through the maps provided and researches. And I was looking at them with Khalil Tofukji, who is the head of cartography at the Arab Society Studies, and was part of the peace delegation process alongside with Yasser Arafat. So it was quite an honor to work alongside him on my research. So tonight, as we reflect on the power of activism and its ability to effect change, we must also acknowledge the tireless efforts of individuals like Lowkey. As a Palestinian, his unwavering commitment to justice and fearless advocacy for the Palestinian cause, it resonates deeply with all of us who yearn for freedom and dignity. And Karim, we are profoundly grateful for having your presence here today with us and your unwavering support for the Palestinian cause. Your voice, it serves as a beacon of hope for the Palestinians everywhere across the world. It reminds us that our struggle is not defined by borders or boundaries, but by our shared humanity and our collective determination to resist oppression. And in closing, let us carry forth the spirit of activism that has brought us together today. I was writing this at 12, so my apologies. So let us stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people and all who yearn for justice and freedom. Together we can build a better world where the rights of all people are respected and upheld. And thank you, Karim, for being among us, for your unwavering dedication for the cause of Palestine, your presence here today. It is a testament to the power of solidarity and resilience and the human spirit, as he traveled hundreds of miles to be here with us and share a room with us and a voice and our questions. So thank you all also for being part of this important conversation. But let us continue to stand together in solidarity until justice prevails for Palestine and all oppressed people around the world. Thank you all, and I shall see you later on at the protest, but this is not closing, as I will pass in to Chandni.
Thank you, Mohammed. There was some mix-up with the schedule, but it was just to add how to get involved locally. So some of you may know that my name's Chandni, and as Rima so rightly mentioned earlier, I'm the chair of Newcastle PSC, and I've been working with PSC since 2014, following a trip to Palestine, and then I later went on to visit the Palestinian refugee camps of Lebanon, and during the Sabra and Shatila massacre spoke to victims of the Nakba, the Naksa, and the Sabra and Shatila massacre, and how we were supposed to end was with Mohammed's speech. But what the intermission was how to get involved locally. So for those who are just coming to this event as a one-off or have not been involved so far, it's more important, especially in light of Rishi Sunak's bizarre speech yesterday, that we are as galvanised as ever. It is obvious that the establishment has been shaken to its core because they have seen thousands, hundreds of thousands of us on the streets outside Westminster, month in, month out, week in, week out. And in Newcastle, as many of you know, since the 7th of October, we've been out on the streets every weekend and at Shutdown Raphael, come rain or shine, calling for a ceasefire, calling for those democratically elected officials to step down because they have not voted for a ceasefire and are so endorsing genocide in Gaza. So if you are not part of an organisation, I would like to encourage all of you to join organisations that you feel you are aligned with. I myself am the chair of Newcastle PSC, but we have others here who are part of Stop the War Coalition, who are part of Friends of Al-Aqsa, who are part of Shutdown Raphael campaign. And it is more important than ever that you galvanise locally. We have lots of events coming up, which, as you know, I announced earlier before Lowkey had arrived. But we have more actions to plan. We are continuously, with the help of a very dedicated and committed team here, attending MP surgeries. Only 2 weeks ago, we managed to shut down Chi Onwara's surgery. And that was the efforts of many in this room today. And the reason why we managed to shut that down is because she moved that surgery from one location to another because she did not have she was too cowardly to face her constituents. So this means we are making an impact, we are making a difference. So I would encourage all of you to, if you are working internationally, join your local movements there. When I was in Cyprus in December, I led and spoke at a demonstration, the very same organisation that spoke at the British bases that Lowkey mentioned earlier, and I had a demonstration there. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, even if you are going abroad, connect with the movements there. It is a collective solidarity in the numbers which are going to make a difference. So please, I encourage all of you to attend those events which I announced earlier, join your local organisations, come with us to shut down those surgeries and demand that those democratically elected officials face their constituents, email, lobby, telephone your MPs, telephone your councillors, hold them to account. They are accountable to us. Do not let them be silent in this. And of course, attend events like these where we have amazing, powerful, impactful and well-educated and well-researched speakers such as Lowkey, giving you the power and the knowledge and the empowerment to go out and make a difference. So thank you, everybody. Now this is the end of the event. And please come to the demonstration which we are going at now at the monument to hear from some amazing Palestinian speakers, including from Lowkey himself. So thank you, everyone. And as always, free Palestine. Free Palestine!